and welcome here to St Colmcille's Church. This is one of those rare occasions when I remember to introduce myself. I normally forget. I am not the parish priest here. I am the parish priest over in St John's on the Falls Road. My name is Martin McGill, and I do want to say right at the very start a huge word of thanks to the parish priest here of St Colmcille's, Father Conor McGrath, who's in the church there somewhere, and to parishioners of St Colmcille's Church for their very warm word of welcome, and also to their hospitality team afterwards as well. We're going to mention the fact, and we're really going to encourage you to stay on for the tea and the coffee. So it's my pleasure to say a huge word of welcome to you. Dennis Stockman, if you're in the church tonight, I still have your words hanging at the back of my mind saying, remember you two, Steve speaking immediately after me, they don't come to hear you two. It's the speakers. So let me just very briefly get through this bit. We'll just do it as a Four Corners Festival point of view. A little bit of interaction right at the very start here. If you're from North Belfast, would you put your hands up and let us know? North Belfast. Oh, yes, not so good tonight. Yes, okay, thank you, North. South.
Get in.
East. I think East may have it. Now, this is where I get very nervous. West. Oh. And finally, outside Belfast. Wow. So Janice, I'm going to hand over to Steve at this stage. So those words, I did listen to you.
When we come up with the theme for Four Corners, which is home, then there was only one way that I wanted to finish tonight, and that was with a song from Dana Masters called Call You Home. It seemed right that we bring someone who now lives here but used to live somewhere else to sing to us about what home means to her here in a year that we're looking at that theme. So thankfully Dana was free, and I didn't only get her but got her husband as well. And you're going to hear from him near the end, but I know that some of you are really only here to hear Dana Masters, so we're going to give Dana two songs to start. If you haven't got that deep good mood, then you need to get that record, beautiful pink cover and some amazing songs within that record. So if you don't have it, well, I don't need to say that, because after she's sung for 5 minutes you'll probably be ordering it straight away before you leave the building. Please welcome, we are so pleased to have her for the third time at Four Corners. We are pleased to have Dana Masters and Cian.
Good evening. It's so wonderful to see you all here tonight. This is our third time doing this festival, and every time it is such an honor and such a wonderful opportunity to be here with you so close to my now home. All right, I'm going to start with a couple of songs for you. And just in case you're looking for it, I actually feel like I like Steve's name of the album better than I like what we actually called the album. He said a deep good mood, but it's called a real good mood, but we might need to rename it. I like deep good mood. Sun is rising, the very same he does every day. He is still shining, even when the clouds are in his way. Moon is glowing, humming her sweet mellow refrain, calling the waters to come gaze on her face. And I am undone. I want to learn to live like this, allowing the simple magic to steal my heart, yeah, steal my heart again. wind is blowing, cooling the heat of what has been, moving and shifting till what's left is all there is. And the trees are dancing, 'cause they have a secret hidden within, always trusting after death a new life will begin. And I am undone. I want to learn to live like this, allowing the simple magic to steal my heart again. The rhythms of the world are moving me towards the peace of letting go of all the worries and the things I can't control. Steal my heart, yeah. Steal my heart, steal my heart, steal my heart, steal my heart again. Thank you. Thank you so much. I've had the pleasure over the last few years of writing with my really good friend Kian. And in fact, a lot of the songs on this new album are songs that we wrote together. And a really incredible part of creating art is you kind of have to dive very deep into yourself and spend more time looking at some thoughts and experiences that you sometimes can quickly pass by. And when I do that, what's really funny is a lot of times what has come out are love songs, which is really sweet, isn't it? Making me very grateful for that experience of all the different loves that I have in my life. And when we were writing, I can sometimes be a little bit melancholic. That's my normal personality. I love to feel just a tiny bit sad. It's lovely. And I remember challenging myself and then saying to Kian, actually, you know what? I want to sort of come up for air a little bit and write a simple love song, like the ones from those movies in the past that weren't complicated at all. You know, it was just boy meets girl, boy has a crush on girl, but there's something that happens, maybe something in the way, an obstacle. They don't like each other, but they really do like each other. Do you know what I mean? And the whole movie and it all ends very nicely. And Harry Connick Jr. does the soundtrack for it, and it's beautiful. Like When Harry Met Sally, right? So we decided we're going to write a song for Harry's next movie that he's going to do. The next When Harry Met Sally. I feel like somebody in love, and it's true what they say about love. When a sweet little voice gives you no choice, then you're somebody in love. Oh like somebody in love. I feel the skies are opened up, and it is strange how a cloud feels like a smile when you're somebody in love. I feel like somebody in love, never been one to open up, so it's a mystery to me how I could be suddenly craving your touch. Lonesome, never felt lonely in silence, just how I long to be, but lately all I could think of is are you still thinking of me? So maybe I'm somebody in love, and it's true what they say about love, that it starts like a seed and grows quietly till you're somebody in love. Oh yeah. Lonesome, never felt lonely in silence, just how I long to be, but lately all I could think of is are you still thinking of me? So maybe I'm somebody in love, and it's true what they say about love, when a sweet little voice gives you no choice, then you're somebody in love. Oh, in love, in love. I feel I'm somebody. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Can I just say, 10 days in, I wore the wrong hoodie. There's a huge big stain here, but Tina says she can rub it out in the photographs, so it's only you that's going to see it. Dana, I thought I had got the wrong title of your album there for a moment, but then, in fact, you proved that I'd got it right. The first sentence you said was, and you need to dive in deep. Just saying. You can ask about the next one. Dana was the one when we got our theme that I knew I wanted to end the festival. The first people we booked and get very nervous was at the end of the last event last year. So those of you in the room could be under pressure. Doug Gay was speaking last year at the final event. Two of his friends happened to come in from Scotland because there was a wedding somewhere around the coast. They heard Doug was speaking, so they came along. Doug says, you need to meet these two. I met them for an hour after it, and I was sure we needed to have them in Belfast this year. Please welcome Peter and Heidi Gardner. Now here's the thing. I did book them, but they brought this thing of wood with them from Scotland. And I walked into 2 Royal Avenue last week and I thought, that's never going to work. But it did, didn't it?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for inviting us over, bring the Peacemakers loom. Thank you for finding 2 Royal Avenue. What a perfect venue for people to come together in. It was the most amazing thing. We put the big loom up, which is about the size of the tiles on the floor, about 7 foot across in old money, and we knitted with people. And you knit stitch by stitch, and people come and join you, and they knit with you. And it was the most moving experience.
But I still don't believe it. Yeah, you just put a loom up and people come and knit with you. Because that's what happens in Belfast of an afternoon. I mean, it's remarkable to watch it. I mean, when did you discover or come up with the idea that that might work? And why do you think it does?
I think there's all sorts of parts to the Peacemakers loom. In 2014, when the Russian-Ukrainian conflict really kicked off, Russia annexed the Crimea, we were working together, as the Church of Scotland minister I am, and we were working together in a church in Glasgow, and the questions around at the time were, how do you respond to such huge moments of conflict? And we felt quite helpless with the questions and helpless with the response. And we spent a lot of time trying to think, what's the smallest act that might empower people to do something, to pray something, to be together? And after a long time of thinking, we realised in the cupboard we had these big circles of wood that we found in a skip. Did you call them skips over here? Yeah, we found them in a skip. I found 10 of them about 20 years ago. And so we built this giant French knitting loom. For those of you who know French knitting, it's the stitch that you teach children on a small spool. 4 nails in a wee wooden thing. Anyone can do it. But we wanted to turn an individual action into a communal action. So we set it in the side of our church, opened the door, and knitted, and waited. And people joined us. And the important thing, I think, about knitting with people is you walk beside them in a kind of circular way around the loom. And we listen. And we listen. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said many years ago, he said, people are looking for an ear to listen, but Christians are talking when they should be listening. That was in 1933. At the loom, we learned to listen.
And you've done this in different places in Scotland and the Edinburgh Festival, Coventry and the Cathedral. How was Belfast different? Both in your intention to come and then how it played out. By the way, I'm not ignoring Heidi. This is just the way it works, and I'll tell you about that later.
I'm the upfront person, and we've just persuaded Heidi to come up front today. I think Steve and Martin put the arm on her. And I'm very grateful to have you up the front with me. Sorry, what's your question, Steve?
You've done this in various places. Belfast, what was your expectations and how did it play out?
Martin asked me this question yesterday, and if I'm honest, I thought it was going to be different. But in lots of ways it wasn't, because people are people wherever, and they have the same joys and they have the same sorrows, and that became very evident, even just on day one. At the same time, when people are telling their story, their history is really important, and we were very aware. We came here as guests, perhaps not knowing a lot about the history of this place other than what over decades we would have been aware in the media. And the great privilege of doing the loom is that complete strangers tell you their stories.
I'm thinking of one woman who spoke to me, and we discussed this, about whether we were coming with expectation or trepidation or what we were feeling. And she said to me, there are troubles here, but people all over the world are troubled. We're not the only people who have trouble.
Interesting. That in itself is insightful. Is there an even more encouraging you might be thinking of this week, a story that you were told or something that happened that made you have a little hope? Because I think as we turn on the news, it's a pretty hopeless world out there and we're looking for some little nuggets of hope. Have you anything for us?
On Thursday night, it was late night art in Belfast, and a different group, a different crowd came into the loom. There were dozens and dozens of young people around the loom, and they were so enthusiastic. But I'm particularly thinking of one very small girl, age 7 maybe, who came, but 8, who came and knitted with us and didn't leave. And she said, "I love this." And she welcomed people to the loom, and she said to them, "Enjoy your evening," when they left. And she taught people to do the stitch. And her openness and welcome to people really encouraged me and made me hopeful for the future, that there's such openness and welcome even among small children.
So how did we do? When I was knitting with Tommy Jameson in P4, I wanted to be at least 3 foot longer than Tommy Jameson's. Tommy, if you're in, I haven't seen you since P7. I'd love to chat to you later. How did we do? Were we all right? Did we? Is there enough?
We'll pass by Steve's contribution to the knitting. This is 92 metres of knitted textile. Most of it has been donated from wool in Belfast. Little balls of wool are transformed into widely knitted stitches. Then they're transformed into a long ribbon, which you see around here, which is then transformed into a large ball of yarn. It weighs quite a lot. Feel free later to come and hold it and feel it. It contains, I think, the memory of all the stories told around the loom. And we would like to leave it here with the Four Corners Festival. Steve. And we like to help you think a little bit about what it might contain. And several years ago, we wrote this little poem about the colours that you see in front of you and knitted around the loom.
Yarn is added by knotting, reef knot, square knot, granny knot with added half hitch, sheep bend, weaver's knot. Colour upon colour, upon colour, upon colour, upon colour, upon colour. Olive, rust, lemon, turquoise, scarlet, teal, white, mauve, grey, green, vermilion, umber, cobalt, orange, cerulean, yellow, lilac, cerise, indigo, aquamarine, mustard, violet, crimson. One row consists of 35 stitches. 30 rows reach from peg to stone. Hundreds more rest in folds on the floor. On the lee side, the knitting piles up in a half circle, a steep dune of yarn. On the windward side, nearest the door, the knitted yarn spreads inward, revealing a structure of soft loops, folia in parallels and tidal curves of colour. Peace is made by many small actions and kind words.
That, when you're away, just before you go, thank you so much for coming. I have to say, I think you need to come back, because I think that it's something that will take a year for people to talk about, and next year they'll be looking forward to it. And what you did for us this year, which I think was even more incredible, you gave us a base in the centre of the city that we were able to come and interact with each other and some of those folk, and to have the exhibition alongside. So your contribution to this festival has been amazing, and we want to thank you so much for it. And the other reason to come next year is Martin's going to want one of these as well. And Campton's going to want one. And everybody in the committee is going to want one. And so maybe 10 years would cover it. But we would love to have you again at some point.
And just thank you for inviting us, and huge thank you to Royal Avenue. A girl came up from Dublin and spent a couple of hours with us, and she said, "This is great, this place. It's like the living room of the city." And I thought, wow, I'm glad we were there. So thank you to them also.
And we will send that message, I think, to the council, because it's such an amazing venue. Leave that back for the moment. I'll try and get to it quickly later on. And thank you so much to Peter and Heidi. Dana and Cian are going to come again. Cian Boyland, I didn't introduce at the start, very amiss of me. So Dana and Cian are going to sing another couple of tunes.
I was born by a river in a little tent. You know, just like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes it is. It's been too hard living, but I am afraid to die. 'Cause I don't know what's out there beyond the skies. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes it is. 'Cause we shall overcome. We shall overcome. And we shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, oh Lord, I do believe. We shall overcome someday. When I was growing up, songs like that embodied my own sense of home, because I grew up in an incredible family in South Carolina in the United States of America. A very lively family, full of characters and storytellers and chancers, as you would call them here. Rascals. And I remember so many meals spent around my grandmother's table, the same stories being told over and over and over again. My family was a civil rights family. My grandmother was a civil rights activist, and so her children by default were born into the civil rights movement. And their stories, the soundtrack of their stories were songs like the two I just sang to you. And for me, those stories, they were the place that made me feel the most at home. Fast forward to growing up, and I decided to move to Los Angeles right after university. Went to university. It was the most independent I'd ever been for 4 years, and I studied music. And then I thought, I'm not going to go home. I'm going to go have an adventure. So I did. I went off to Los Angeles, and I had the adventure of my life. But what was really interesting is I think that was the beginning of the weakening of that sense of home. I felt so independent, so alive, like I could write my own story, but also a bit untethered in the sense of not really knowing where in the world I belong started to creep in. And it was a beautiful time because in Los Angeles, I met the man I would later call my husband. And he was a man from Northern Ireland. And he loved Northern Ireland. And he was only in LA for 2 years to study. And I knew there was no point falling in love with this man unless I would entertain the idea of living in a small country that I had never heard of. And as they say, ignorance is bliss and naivety is wonderful. And I thought, sure, I'll move to Northern Ireland, let's do it. So we got married November 1st, 2008, and I think by the 6th of November 2008, I was living in my new home of Northern Ireland. Now, I can honestly say 16 years on that this is home, and I love living amongst you. And I love living amongst your own story. And part of my story has been how living here has caused me to redefine for myself what home means. And not too long ago, Kean and I were writing for this album, and he sent me some music that he had been playing around with and recording on the piano. And I remember Andrew and I sat down and we watched this movie. And it moved me so much because something deeply resonated with me from the characters of the movie. And I realized it was that sense, that desperation of human connection and belonging. And from that moment, this song was born. And really, it's one of the truest songs, the most rawest songs that I've ever written, because it tells the story of the beginning of that feeling of home creeping in through falling in love. And how wonderful it is that sometimes a sense of home is actually rooted in another person, not in a building or a place, but in a human. So this is that song. Of a nightmare, it's a welcome reverie. In crowded rooms where voices carry like perfume, your brown eyes still refuse to let go of me. I shouldn't need you like I need you, but I need you. Whatever all the rest, I shouldn't need you like I need you, but I need you, and it's all that I have left. We move slow from the safety of a shadow, and deep inside I know ever need. And you pull me deep as your weathered hands, they tend to me, pruning my dead leaves till I learn to live again. I shouldn't need you like I need you, but I need you, whatever all the rest. I shouldn't need you like I need you, but I need you, and it's all that I have left. Know the hills we ran through, crossed empty deserts and hostile lands to just hear the sweet, sweet lullaby of a quiet night. Cold hands wake me up in my bed from the clutches of the nightmare. Oh, so welcome reverie. Every day, darling, I need you. I need you. Yeah. No, no, oh, I need you.
I'm going to give George a chance to press some buttons there, so thank you very much for those powerful songs we've just listened to. Delighted to introduce Reverend Dr. Neil Craigan. For those who've been at a number of events during the week, you may have noticed Neil gently going around the room taking photographs. He's still taking photographs tonight, though he won't be for the next number of minutes because I'm going to invite him to come here and speak. Neil, originally from Belfast, grew up in the south of the city, began his training for ministry here in Belfast, completed it in the United States, and he's now the minister of First Presbyterian Church, White Bear Lake, Minnesota. He's an author, he's a thinker, he writes blogs, Human Again, Life in the Image of God. And I'm going to invite Neil Craigan, my friend, to share some thoughts with us here this evening and his reflections on Home ? And Four Corners Festival 2025.
Where do you want it, George? About there? Lovely, that works. You know, I love the Four Corners Festival. I've been coming here for years, but there's one thing that really bothers me. And it's always at the start of each event, when they go round the room and they ask you to raise your hand on what part of the city you're from. Because every time they say South Belfast, I go, do I? Don't I? Do I? Don't I? Or am I raising my hands from when I'm outside of the city because I'm living in America now? Where is home for me these days? I don't know how you feel about that, Miley. Dana, when you come, it's easy because you live in Lisburn. You're already outside of the city, so you've got it hands down there. But I've always considered Belfast my home. Born in the Royal Victoria Hospital under the shadow of Divis and Black Mountain, this place is deeply embedded in my DNA. This is where my life was formed. This is where my life was shaped. Belfast was my home until I moved to the United States in 1992. And over there, people would always ask me, so where are you from? And I tell them, oh, I'm from Belfast. Oh, you're from Ireland. I'd be like, I'm from Northern Ireland. Oh, you're from the north of Ireland. Sure. I could have explained hundreds of years of Irish history to them. I could have explained all the cultural differences that we have here in this place that we call home. And for a while I tried. And then I realized they don't care. I come from Belfast. Belfast is on the island of Ireland. And whether I like that or not, as a Presbyterian moving there initially, for all they cared, I was just simply Irish. I still call Belfast home. I just don't live here anymore. But if I still call Belfast home and I don't live here anymore and I left here in 1992, then where the heck do I live today? Is that home? See, when I'm traveling back here, I have to live with this wonderful little conundrum that I'm leaving home to go home, but then once I'm home, I have to once again leave home to go back home. But when I say Belfast is home, I don't actually mean Belfast. When I say Belfast is home, I mean really just a section of the city. In my case, it was Belfast BT9. I came home from the Royal in 1968 to number 14 Hillside Park. Then in 1975, we moved from there to Greenview Park in the Upper Malone area. Much of the city of Belfast was shut off to me. It was unknown to me during my childhood. I went to school in BT9. I went to Stranmillis Nursery School, and then from there I went to Inchmarlow. Yes, there were fingers that sort of extended outside of that region of the city in which I lived. My granny and grandpa, they lived in the Aya house off the Antrim Road. But by 1974, with all that was going on in that stretch of the Murder Mile, as it came to be known, they'd sold that place to St. Vincent de Paul and moved to Bladen Drive, BT9. Mother, granny and grandpa, they lived in Richmond Park, BT9. My uncle and aunt, they lived in Gracetown and then they moved to Derrimore. Yeah, you know it, right? BT9. Isn't that the way it is for most of us, though, when we call Belfast home? We mean our area, our region. Yeah, there were occasional shout-outs to Ravenhill, Castlereagh, swimming pool, the zoo, or then when we were little after Christmas, taking our Christmas money and going into town and finding something to buy in the sales in town. But I lived in a small area, and in my case, a very sheltered part of the city. And as I grew older, more of the city opened up to me. More of it became home. I moved from Inchmarlow to Inst. And again, friends then from different postcodes, and many hours were spent after school wandering the centre of the city. Yet the city itself still remained a mystery. I loved the life I had as a child. I loved our neighbours. Michael Longley lived 2 doors down from us when he was in his early 30s, still an unknown poet. Hearing him fabricate stories for us as children. His oldest daughter was just a year older than myself. There were lots of kids our age, families trying to make their way in life. And it was a real time of innocence for me. But I had to grow up. The lens through which I was looking at the world wasn't sufficient. It needed to change. I needed to change. This really hit home for me once I started at university. I was studying sociology out at Jordanstown, and a majority of my classmates there were from West Belfast. They were nationalist, Republican. They were politically active. And most of them had a friend or relative who were either in prison or had been murdered as part of the Troubles. And I would sit and I would listen to their stories as we talked to one another about life. And to be honest, at that point, I really didn't have much to say. I couldn't relate. But I had empathy for what I was hearing from them, because Belfast was their home too. Yet for them at that time in the late 80s, it was a hostile environment. It was an occupied home. It was a home that was full of fear and anxiety. I lived in another world, because I lived in BT. That's right. You see, it was Tuesday, March 2nd, 1982. And the IRA had just tried to assassinate Lord Chief Lowry. Lord Lowry was at Queen's University to give a lecture. And they fired at Lord Lowry through plate glass windows in College Gardens, a house that was owned by Barry Crimble, who at the time was one of Northern Ireland's top orthopaedic surgeons. But because they fired at him through the plate glass windows, the bullets missed their trajectory and they hit a professor of accounting instead. And the Lord Chief Justice was spared. That evening, police cars pulled up outside our house. And Lord Lowry, who in our house was just known as Robbie, came in for a drink with my dad. And that one drink became 2 drinks because of what had happened that day, and it probably became a whole lot more. Then a short time later, another car pulled up, a BMW this time, and out popped Barry Crimble, the surgeon whose house had been broken into, and 3 good mates were enjoying time together that evening. I didn't share that story with my mates at university. Didn't think it would go over too well with them. But the same city, different worlds. Belfast is home for me. Belfast is home for the people I went to university with, but a very different place for each one of us. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee's novel, the character Atticus Finch says this: "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." And I love that idea of climbing into somebody's skin and walking around in it. It's so much better, I think, than the idea of walking a mile in somebody's shoes. It means really getting inside somebody else's life and really trying to understand and appreciate all the others are going through. And that's what I love about Four Corners. It invites us to climb into one another's skin. Try it on for a while. Walk around in it. Feel the world from the perspective and the point of view of others. And that's what we've been doing all week. Yes, we might all call this part of the world home, even those of us who have moved away, or some of us who have moved here. But it's different for each one of us. But it's home for all of us. But in another sense, this whole world is our home. We depend on the world beyond this city to take care of our needs. And as we heard last Sunday night, for those of you who were there from Dr. Lorna Gold, it's important for us to continue to take care of this planet that we live on. We might inhabit only a small part of it, but the health of the whole impacts us all. As she said, we live on a finite earth with interconnected systems. See, if you think about the biblical story for a few minutes, it begins with those great words. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And God looked at it all and goes, that's really good. That is fantastic. That is beautiful. And this creation in which we live is a demonstration of God's creative imagination. This planet on which we live is God's work of art. It's sacred. The psalmist reminds us that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And then along comes the humans in the story. Right? In that final act of creation, God scoops up some dirt from the earth and molds something that must have looked like a person in some way, shape, or form. But that part of creation is not quite done yet, because God takes that inanimate object and breathes into it. And it's when the breath of God is put into that first person that humanity becomes a living entity. We're both of God and the earth, created in the image of God and given God the responsibility by God to care and represent God's interests in this world. You and I have become curators of creation. And for a short period of time in that story, if you remember, there's a little period of harmony between God, creation, and humanity. But it doesn't take very long before we start vandalizing God's fine work of art. The temptation in the garden sadly reflects humanity's desire to be like God in ways that God never intended us to be. You see, as God's image bearers, we were already like God in all the ways in which God intended us to be. But we wanted more. And so we rebelled. Because we wanted to be top dog. So Adam and Eve, we know what they did. They ate the fruit. And then Cain, he wanted to be top dog and was not happy when his brother Abel was favored. And so what did Cain decide to do? He decided to murder his brother. And God confronts Cain and says to him, "What have you done? Where's your brother?" And Cain looks at God and goes, "Am I my brother's keeper?" We're not told what God says, but it's implied. What's the answer? I can't hear you. Yes. Yes. You see, this is the moment in the story when humanity stopped believing that there was enough room and resources on this planet for everyone. We became greedy. We became greedy and we wanted it all for ourselves or for our people, or we wanted it for our tribe. And that's when we learned to denigrate the humanity of others so that we could lord it over them. It became all about my home and not our home. Too many people wanted to define their home as their castle, a place to protect rather than a place of hospitality and welcome. It became a vision of home rooted in sin rather than redemption. It became a vision of home rooted in scarcity rather than abundance. It became a vision of home rooted in fear rather than in grace. If you were at Siobhan Garrigan's talk last Tuesday, you'd have heard her speak about the ways in which selfishness and greed have driven us apart, and the need for us to develop a skill set of love and not just treat love as a mere sentiment. How we have to learn again the idea and the notion of companionship with one another in this world. There's a need for all of us to return to our true selves as people who bear the image of God in this world. We need recreation. We need restoration. And we need salvation, because that word just means healing. As through Christ we once again become the people that God intended us to be. There's far too many people today who are still like Cain, who want it all for themselves, and when asked about the welfare of others are just like, yeah, not me. I'm in it for myself. I'm not my brother's keeper. And God is still shouting out, yes, yes, you are. Yes, yes, you are. You see, as Martin pointed out, I currently live in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. And like many suburban areas in Minnesota, it grew significantly after the Second World War. But those growing suburbs and the homes and all they offered, they weren't there for everyone. They weren't designed to be homes for all people. You see, there were some people that weren't considered good enough or human enough to live there. The dignity of all people was not recognized. Some people just weren't allowed to call it home. You see, American federal law in 1968 prohibited using racial bias to restrict property ownership. And so that became a non-issue in theory at that point. But many houses and neighborhoods in our area still have what they call racial covenants in their property deeds. Just down the street from our church, there's a neighborhood, and the property deed there still reads this: property shall not be sold or rented to or used by any person except a person or persons of the white Caucasian race. But persons of other races may occupy the premises when employed as servants by the owner. Discrimination, it's not just a Northern Ireland thing. It's a global thing. Because we've not lived up to our calling to be God's people. We've not lived up to the calling to be the image bearers of God in a broken world. And there are these shadows of a broken world that once again need the light of Christ to shine on them. And the light of Christ will only shine on them through us when we step up to bring that light into the world. You see, a fractured and a broken world loves to live in the shadows and in the darkness as it divides people against people, and it makes it my home but not your home. And so we live in a world that divides black and white, Jew and Palestinian, Protestant and Catholic, Hutu and Tutsi, Brahmin and untouchable, British and Irish, nationalist and unionist. But in a redeemed world, in the church, in the kingdom of God, we're told by Paul in his letter to the Galatians, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. He also says it again in Colossians. Here there is neither Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all. You see, that's the undoing of tribalism right there. That's telling us that this world should be a home for all of us. It's allowing the earth to be the home for everyone that God intended it to be in the first place. There's a reason why the early church adopted the language of family for the church. Because Paul tells us that from one person, God made all the nations who live on the earth. We're all related. That's why we call each other brother and sister. And yet, all too often, so-called Christians fall far too easily into tribalism. And my own family has played its part in that as well. It's played its part in creating the divisions that made Belfast not home for some. My great-great-grandfather was the Reverend Dr. William McCain, who was a former moderator of the Presbyterian Church. He was a staunch anti-Catholic unionist. And on Ulster Day, in the 28th of September 1912, he was the one who stood beside Edward Carson in the Ulster Hall and preached the sermon, ripping scripture out of context as he declared the Irish question is at bottom a war against Protestantism. It is an attempt to establish a Roman Catholic ascendancy in Ireland, to begin the disintegration of the empire by securing a second parliament in Dublin. I asked my dad, would it be okay if I apologised for the ways our family tried to make this place less of a home for many of its residents? And he said to me, he said, you know, Neil, it would. But you have to remember to mention the Leslie side of our family then too, which is the side of the family that were United Irishmen. Mr. Leslie of Coleraine was sentenced to be hanged for his involvement. His sentence was commute, and his son became the first minister of Molesworth Presbyterian in Cookstown. And then he said, well, but then you better also mention the Holmes side of the family, because the Reverend William Holmes out in Island McGee formed the Ballyeaston Yeomanry to fight the United Irishmen. So you better mention them while you're at it too. And they said, why don't you actually talk about the family name, Craigan? Because we're not sure how it became Craigans actually. The family lore is that possibly we originated in the west of Ireland, and then during the famine migrated to County Down. And it was there then that perhaps we became Presbyterians, so that we could marry, find work, and secure a future. So when I look at my family history, I go, okay, so we're Unionist, Nationalist, Loyalist, Republican, Catholic, and Protestant. Well, that's a good place to be. You know what that makes us? Makes us human. Makes us human. Everyone on this planet bears the image of God. No exceptions. I have one old lady in our church, and she comes up to me and she goes, Neil, do I really have to believe that Donald Trump's in the image? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Because there are no exceptions. Humanity represents God's image bearers from every nation, every tribe, and every tongue. And I wonder, do we really understand and appreciate how deeply interconnected we are with one another? Because all too often we still live with hostility rather than hospitality towards others who aren't like us, who aren't one of us. There are those that we just don't want to allow to be able to call it home. We want to keep them on the outside looking in. We want to deprive them of the opportunity to succeed. We want to make them second-class citizens if we'll allow them to become citizens at all. Last Monday evening, I'm sitting in the Duncairn, listening to the stories behind the place names of Belfast. Absolutely fascinating. And if you didn't get to any of these talks I've mentioned, they are all going to be coming up online in the next week or so, right? So you'll be able to tune in and take a listen to them. Highly recommend it. But I couldn't help but let my mind that night drift back across the Atlantic to Minnesota, to a place where our director of children's ministry and her family were living, in the city of Minneapolis. It's an intersection in the city at 38th Street and Chicago Avenue. For many years, it was just another intersection in the city. Nothing big there. Little shop on the corner. Gas station. You guys call them petrol stations. I never know which language I'm going to speak when I get up here. Little gas station on the corner. But that intersection gained international fame on the 25th of May 2020. George Floyd walked out of Cup Foods, and there on the side of the road, he was murdered by the police. That intersection 38 in Chicago now has a new name, George Floyd Square. Cup Foods, the little grocery store there, now has a new name, Unity Foods. Within hours, people were flooding the site. It became holy ground. All the protests were elsewhere. The people of the neighbourhood shut it off so that you couldn't get in. They checked you for weapons. They made sure everybody was safe. It became a sacred space. A couple of days after George Floyd's murder, I drove into the city. And as usual, I had my camera in my hand, and I feel a bit naked at Four Corners event right now without it. And I got down on the ground because I wanted to shoot an image of a vase of roses with a handwritten note on it that simply read, R.I.P. George Floyd. When all of a sudden it struck me that the place that I had chosen to lay down was the exact same spot on the road where George Floyd was laying 2 days earlier. It was sacred ground. But then again, the whole world is sacred because this is God's world. I wept at what I saw that day. A young girl with a sign that said, I have a brother, he's black, please don't kill him. A young boy, 5 or 6 years old, with a bright yellow sign reading, Am I next? Their home had been turned into a place of anxiety and fear. Many people were holding signs that simply read, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe were the last words of far too many people in America whose lives were taken from them by lethal chokeholds. You know what? Whatever else home is, if it's truly home, it has to be a place where all people can breathe freely together. So here we are, last night of the festival, and I wonder, what sort of home are we creating? Are we creating a home where everyone can feel welcome? Because we're not there yet. So what do we need to let go of in order to make that a reality? To allow Belfast to become a home where all people feel like they can breathe freely. In those last Technicolor moments in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy clicks her heels together and she repeats over and over again, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. And then she's magically transported from that Technicolor world of Oz back into the black and white world of Kansas. And when she gets home, she finds it's still an imperfect place. But she's more in love with her home than ever before. You know, Belfast, this city, with all her imperfections, she invites all of us to call her home. This beautiful, scarred city, disfigured, wounded, broken, yet loved. She has space for all of us, Catholic, Protestant, Jew, Hindu, Muslim, atheist, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, English speakers, Irish speakers, Somali speakers, Urdu speakers, Polish speakers. Belfast says she has room for everyone who bears the image of God. The question is, will we as God's image bearers make room for others who also bear that image but might be a little different from us? Belfast, this land, part of God's very good creation, invites us to breathe, to make her a home for all. Let's do our part and make that a reality. Thank you.
Neil, I needed a moment to get myself back. That was powerful, challenging, wonderful, moving, helping us reflect on the theme of home, ? And so I have the pleasure of announcing the theme of the festival for 2026, which is Journey. For those who were around on Friday night, the cat slipped out of the bag. Thankfully, he moved on quite quickly. So that's our theme next year, and it fits in so incredibly well with the challenge that Neil has laid down before us. And to set us off on our theme for next year, Journey, delighted to announce our keynote speaker for the Sunday night is the Bishop of Dover, Bishop Rose Hudson Wilkin, who's born in Jamaica, who is the first black woman bishop in Britain and has been delighted to accept our invitation to help us as a city and beyond explore Journey. Before I hand over to Steve, I want to say thanks. First of all, I want to say thanks to you for coming here tonight, and not just tonight, but right throughout the festival. I've loved the opportunity to have a little bit of interaction with people in the church or the various places we've been. So it's another hands up for a few moments. Not be too many of these, but a few moments. If this is your first event here in this year's festival, would you put your hands up? Thank you. If you've been to 2 events, this is now your second one then. Thank you. 3, don't worry, we'll stop. More than 5? Thank you very much. Rather tired looking, but I will come to them in a moment. Your presence, your support, your encouragement really means so much to us. And we've really appreciated, as a committee, the ways in which you have encouraged us right throughout this festival and beyond. The power of words, your hospitality to us, your sense of really keeping us going. So a huge word of thanks to you all. And when I'm still thanking people, can I say a massive amount of thanks to all the volunteers, to the directors of Four Corners Festival, to those on the planning committee, to those who volunteer on a weekly basis, some well behind the scenes. And people can be hours and hours here beforehand, whether it's George, and I'm conscious I don't want to mention too many people because inevitably I'll forget something, setting up the sound system, and probably George, helped by Christine, one of the last people out of the building. I've been to pretty much all the events, and no matter how early I've been to it, the pop-ups and the banners are already there because Stephen Gregg has been well and truly there before me. And the people who are out, whether it's, I've been talking about the 3Ms, Miley and Maggie and Maureen, their presence and their support right throughout the whole festival. And of course, I want to mention another M, and that is Megan, our incredible administrator, who holds us group of rather diverse individuals together and brings about a festival, the miracle, which is Megan. So a huge word of thanks to everyone on the committee and planners and supports.
That's me, I think it is, so it's you.
Like to thank the media folk as well, who are there every night, Tina and Ruth and their team, who do so much as well. But genuinely, if you see somebody in a teal sweatshirt or hoodie tonight, please thank them from us for everything that they do all year, not just this week.
And that includes Catherine in St John's too.
Catherine's in her teal. Yeah, and I need to talk about that. We got these lovely teal hoodies and the Catholics in the Falls stole the colour. Make of that what you like. They can be home in my city any time though. A couple of things just before our encore. There are questionnaires, and if you've been here 5 times, apologies, turn off, switch off at this point. But they're online, you might get one sent to you. Please fill these out because the funders need to know what height you are and what width you are and what weight you are and what colour your hair is and all that kind of stuff we've been trying to break down. And it helps us to get funding, but it also helps us, you'll not believe the pie charts that Megan puts that in within a few days of the festival, so that when we come back we're looking at all the different people that came from where to what and all the rest. Please fill those in. They are so valuable to us. And as I've been saying all week, or all 10 days, just give us what you think the festival is worth for you. If it was worth nothing, then go out and wipe the dust off your feet and don't look back. But if there was something you picked up from it or something it was useful for, or you sensed some moment in it, please look at the QR codes, go online. There's buckets at the door, but I'm aware people don't carry money much anymore, so the QR codes become more important. And listen, when you go home and right now you're intending to do that and then you get home and you forget, try and remember it sometime and just put some money in. The best way, £2 a month or something, to be a friend of the festival, and that would be so appreciated from us. Not only the money you put in, but just knowing there's people who are with us every month is another thing that's very, very important to us. Have I left in and out, Father?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
That's wonderful.
You're going to bring us into
I am going to, that's exactly what I'm going to do, Father. He doesn't trust the Presbyterians to know where we're going next. And if you've worked with me for 13 years, there's history. As I said, when I heard what the theme was, you were hearing this next song. And I'm just glad it wasn't Neil that had to sing it to you, that we got Dana and Cian to come and sing it to us. And then, wonderfully, Dana's husband, pastor at Lisburn Vineyard, Andrew Masters, is going to come and just do something for us to lead us out of the festival. And we'll not be back up here until next year, but we'll be around chatting to you, thanking you for 10 amazing days.
You mentioned the hospitality. They have a wonderful hospitality team.
Father, I don't even know where that is.
All right, okay. Well, Steve, it's just across the other side in the parish hall. They don't even need to leave the grounds.
There you are. Tea and coffee. Come and talk to us. Father, have I finished?
You have.
First communion okay?
So, over to Dana.
See you next year. Dana, Cian and Andrew.
Lost my way in a desert land, searching for somewhere I could stand. High and dry, I crossed the sea. Wasn't looking for a home, but home found me. The wide open arms of your heels pulled me in. I fell for your charms and your wild northern winds. And then you lay me down and whispered soft and sweet, I'll be your home if you let me. Nothing to give I had, nothing to bring, and still you held my hand and eased my suffering. And when I close my eyes, I still hear you breathe, and with every sigh you bring life to me. The wide open arms of your hills pull me in. Fell for your charms and your wild northern winds. And then you lay me down and whispered soft and sweet, I'll be your home if you let me. I'll call you home if you let me. I'll call you home if you let me. I'll call you home if you let me.
Good evening. Just in case any of you are doubting Steve and Father Martin's ability to accomplish what others have said is impossible, I've spent 16 years trying to avoid following my wife, but here we are. My grandfather used to say that home was the place that you could look your worst and feel your best. And spent most of my life living and calling rural County Down home. But as Dana mentioned, we moved from Los Angeles back to these parts in 2008, and I couldn't convince her to move to the countryside. She said, I grew up in a city, I went to university in a city, you met me in a city, and we better live in a city, and so we ended up buying a house in the city of Lisburn. I've since convinced her to make her home in the countryside, but about 6 months after we'd moved into our house, Dana was getting up the next morning to go to work early. We were sharing a car at the time. I was trying to sleep in, and she came up and poked me. She said, where are the car keys? And I said, I left them on the sideboard in that really obvious place so you wouldn't have to wake me while... And she went back downstairs to look for the keys, and she came back up and said, can't find the keys. It's worse than that, there's no car in the driveway. You see, growing up in the countryside, we were surrounded by neighbours and everybody was known. I never locked a door in my life, and being the naive country bumpkin that I was the night before, it never occurred to me to check if the doors were locked. And so some opportunists had tried our conservatory door and found the keys in a really obvious spot and taken the car. Now, they were very considerate thieves. They set the car on fire in Dunmurry to save us the trouble the next day of going to find it. My bedtime routine has henceforth been checking all the doors are locked. The wily old prophet Isaiah, speaking of the moment when the city of God is made new on the earth, prophesies of a city whose gates are never shut. You see, the so-called wise among us in cities full of strangers and suspicion make sure our doors are firmly locked at night. But one day, there'll be a city whose doors will never shut, never mind being locked. There will be no such things as strangers or immigrants or foreigners. That city will be a place of welcome, of wonder, and of worship. And of course, the challenge for all of us in this moment as this festival comes to an end is to embody that great challenge of Jesus to make the future real now. As we close this year's festival, I want to ask you the question, what does it look like to live life with open doors and unlocked hearts? What if home wasn't confined or even defined by the orphan spirit of our age? What if we could be liberated by a homecoming at first within us and then through us to all around us? What if home wasn't a place but was more an atmosphere, a posture, a way of living? And of course, as we've been so powerfully reminded in word and who knew by knitting, that revolution has already begun. This country preacher is so aware that he's talking to a choir who are already singing this homecoming song, singing it in community gardens and knitting groups in church halls, singing it listening to poets and artists and spoken word all week long. Home, not a place, but a way of living. And so Four Corners Festival 2025, let the revolution continue. May you each continue to live boldly in the opposite direction of suspicion. And may the face of God in the stranger allow you to see your brother. May Belfast be known as a city whose doors are never shut. I'd like us to finish. I'm going to invite you to stand, but I don't want you to stand and bow your heads and look at me. I would love you to stand and choose a direction to face as I pray and close this year's festival. If you're able, please stand. You're so well formed in sitting in church buildings in rows, it'll feel slightly odd to look at the back of someone's head, or maybe even odder still to look into someone's face. If the awkwardness is somewhat relieved by closing your eyes, you might want to do that, but this is much more the posture of the people of God than rows staring at someone at the front. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to imagine the street that you live on. Almighty God, the one who sees, would you fill us with worship and with wonder? Would you empower us to live lives of unlocked hearts and open doors? And may Belfast become a place known as home for all. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you.